I love it.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. My name is Matt Heinz. I am your host, and very excited to be here for another episode. We are around 325 now episodes of Sales Pipeline Radio over the last several years, and then happy to have you here. If you are watching and listening live on LinkedIn or on Facebook or YouTube, we're very excited to have you here. If you are on LinkedIn watching live, you can be part of this show. You can ask questions of our guest today. You can make comments. We'll make you part of the show and make this inclusive and interactive. But thanks for being here. If you're watching live, or excuse me, watching on demand or listening to this through the podcast feed, thank you very much for downloading, for subscribing, for watching. All of our episodes, past, present, and future, always available at salespipelineradio.com. And every week we're featuring some of the best and brightest minds in sales and marketing. Today is absolutely no different. Very excited to have, haven't seen him in a long time, so excited to get to spend some time with CEO, co-founder of SalesHood, Elay Cohen.
Great to be here, Matt. Elay Cohen, SalesHood. Love it. Thanks for doing this. I can't believe 325 episodes. Look at you. It's amazing.
It's all about just showing up, man. I mean, it's showing up, and literally, if the key for me in doing that is just like 11:30 Pacific every Thursday, we do a show. It's on the calendar. We book good guests and just make it happen.
Yeah, make it happen. And you're booked out. You're booked out.
Listen, I mean, I consider you one of the OGs of sales enablement. I mean, even back before that was a phrase, you spent 7+ years at Salesforce, and a lot of that time was sort of running sales productivity.
Yeah.
And sort of that sort of evolved into sort of what is now sort of a very robust sales enablement category. So maybe talk a little bit about your sort of background, where you come from, and the sort of where then, almost 10 years ago now, you created SalesHood.
Well, I appreciate it. And, when I got tapped on the shoulder from Mark Benioff to lead sales enablement at salesforce.com, it wasn't a thing. Right. And so we spent 8 years building out a lot of the processes, a lot of the best practices that we all are now living in, right? And so we anchored our program back then on some fundamental principles, which was, let's get our teams aligned on messaging. Let's deliver a coaching and onboarding experience that's personalized. But you know what? When I was at Salesforce, I had 120 people on my team, Matt. And so I started thinking on the back end of my career, there's got to be a better way. And so that was really the inspiration. I wanted to build a system that will enable companies to have best practices in enablement, to scale all these enablement practices, from learning to coaching to content sharing to measuring outcomes, right? Just when you think of scale. And it was incredible. We founded the company, and there were only a few of us that were doing it way back when. And now, like, I did the math the other day, Matt. Over $4.6 billion invested in all the companies in the sales enablement category just in the last 3 years.
It's amazing. It's amazing that, from back, I distinctly remember having coffee with you in San Francisco, like probably 9 years ago, when you were getting it going, and there was no sales enablement category, right? But I think what you did at Salesforce, seeing that someone needs to do a better job of training and enabling sales reps, right? Like, they've got access to content, but it's random, it's ad hoc, it's not scalable. Talk about, now that we have this industry, and there's a number of players that have sort of followed your lead, like, talk a little bit about stickiness of these platforms, right? Because just like a lot of things, a lot of companies buy these tools, but they're not always well used. How do you create stickiness and effectiveness of a sales enablement platform?
Yeah. So let me just start by saying, listen, when we founded the company, our mission was to create a purpose-built, all-in-one sales enablement platform that would deliver meaningful impact to sales and marketing leaders and to sellers, and ultimately to buyers as well, right? Because you want to have an experience. And so there are a lot of companies out there that have pivoted from learning management systems, pivoted from CMS systems, content management systems, pivoted from, conversation intelligence even, right? And these companies are all like, oh yes, we do sales enablement. And so in order for it to stick, and in order for it to really, really drive the business outcomes, it needs to impact the right outcomes. And that was our vision, right? And so when I think about how do organizations really get value, because I love your question, how do you make sales enablement stick? There is a proliferation of tools out there, but I'll argue that there aren't that many tools that were purpose built from the ground up designed to be able to provide impact-based outcomes to sales teams, the ability to personalize the learning experience and the content sharing experience, and really provide an end-to-end workflow that's going to enable a sales professional to get their job done faster and more efficiently. And we'll go into some of the details, but kind of high level, those are some of the dimensions that I start thinking about when you ask me the question, how to make things stick.
Well, that environment has certainly changed a lot, in the last several years, and especially in the last couple of years, right? As you have a lot of, people that have been selling through inside sales teams, selling virtually, but now not just selling in a call center, but selling in their basement or from a coffee shop or wherever they are. How has the sales enablement needs evolved? I mean, it's not really, the pandemic didn't create it. It sort of accelerated a trend that was already happening.
Absolutely.
When you have a more virtual distributed sales team, how has sales enablement requirements changed as part of that?
For sure. So I'm going to tell you a story, pre-COVID, when I would meet CEOs and CROs and CMOs, and we would talk about sales enablement, they'd look at me and they'd say, you know what? I don't really think we need a system for that. We can fly our people to Vegas, and our reps, our success folks, our account managers, they're visiting people on site. We're good. We don't really need a system to automate, and we don't really think asynchronous collaboration and asynchronous learning is a thing. Don't worry about it. We're good. Yeah. Post-pandemic, all of a sudden, the website started going off the hook. People are like, wait a minute, you enable teams to learn from each other, learn together, collaborate asynchronously, using video, using content sharing, and ultimately engaging with buyers. Like, you do that whole workflow. Like, yeah, okay, we need that. That's been the big change. And I think everyone talks about the pandemic accelerating digital. And so the pandemic has absolutely accelerated digital for the sales community and for sales and marketing collaboration, and ultimately for the buyer journey. And it's why we invested in, over the last 2 to 3 years, we really leaned into creating digital sales rooms and buyer sites, because ultimately, talking back to your question, how do you make sales enablement stick, right? Yeah. You've got to create impact and value for your teams, and you've got to boost their confidence, so that they actually, and you got to boost their confidence around what? Around the content that they're going to share with your buyers. And that content now isn't just being shared in live, right? You're going to share content asynchronously. You're going to share content before a meeting. You're going to share pre-videos, post-videos. So digital selling, I think, has really heightened the importance of a robust, purpose-built, all-in-one sales enablement platform, and not just like saying our LMS, our learning management system, can make it work, because it's not going to solve the workflow. Or, your content portal, your CMS system, that's not going to fly either. So that's why I'm like, purpose-built, man. It's got to be purpose-built.
So there's a lot of categories. Well, first of all, we're talking today with Elay Cohen. He's the CEO, co-founder of SalesHood, and talking about sales enablement and helping sales enablement platforms and initiatives stick. And, it's interesting to see how categories are created and named, and how they sort of how they sometimes feel like it limits what we think of them as. Like marketing automation, not automated. Account-based marketing, not just for marketing. Sales enablement, yes, enabling sales teams, but there's a buyer enablement component to this as well, right? Yeah. So ideally, the content and the tools and the efforts we're doing to enable sales should be reducing friction and increasing viscosity on the buyer side, which is why I think the idea of sort of buyer sites and digital sales rooms is so interesting, because it's really sort of combining buyer and sales enablement together.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm spending a lot of time thinking about the name. I do believe people are talking a lot about rev enablement. We're seeing kind of the rise of rev ops as well. But I recently looked at some of the trends, and sales enablement is still on the rise in terms of what people are ultimately wanting, in terms of a system to help reduce the friction, improve win rates, drive better buyer engagement, because ultimately we're selling, right? And organizations, our sales teams, our customer success folks, our account managers, our partner channels, we are selling. And the purpose of enablement, yes, is to get people to buy. We want to help them make decisions faster, and the right decisions. But my prediction is, I think sales enablement will stick as the category name, and sales enablement platform. And there's some other stuff we can talk about, but I'm not sure if that was your question. What were you thinking?
I don't know. I mean, I think just knowing that, if enabling sales is about enabling buyers, right? And I don't mind calling it sales enablement, because if you're just selling and selling in a in a seller-centric, selfish way, you're not going to sell a whole lot of stuff to begin with, right? And so I
Right.
think it's part and parcel together. But
I think.
there's
Sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I have one comment. I think the big realization over the last 2 to 3 years, as we've really helped companies, is taking the buyer journey and infusing it into the sales enablement system. So your onboarding, your ramping, your ongoing learning, your coaching, your content AI is all following a buyer's journey. So ultimately, you're really elevating the competence and confidence and content that your teams are developing as skills and as the tools that they're using. I think that's really kind of what the pandemic has really helped accelerate, and it's connecting those two. And by the way, the other benefit is you got sales and marketing alignment now.
Yeah.
If you got the buyer journey in the middle and you got a sales enablement system that's going to enable you to track it and enable your people and develop the people. The one thing we haven't talked about are the metrics and the analytics, right? And the reason why companies today, they require a purpose-built all-in-one sales enablement platform. The reason is it's so hard to figure out what's working, what's not working. So if you're going to take a hodgepodge of systems and you're going to take your learning management system, you're going to take your content management system, you're going to take your, a proliferation of tools that you're going to try and stitch together. At the end of the day, when your CMO and CRO are looking at each other and they're saying, okay, we rolled out this new pitch. What impact did it have? I don't know. It's hard to tell. But if you have one system and you know how your teams are learning, you know which ones are being accredited, you know what content is being shared, and I can look at rep profiles, team profiles, I can look at profiles by GL, and I can look at the analytics, and I can correlate it with leading indicators like pipeline creation and pipeline progression, then that's the money shot for me. And that answers the why and how you're going to make this really stick. Back to your question.
It makes it a cycle, right?
Yes.
Like you launch things that you get more specific and more strategic around what you create based on impacting the buying journey, based on most effective impact on sales. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. And so having an opportunity to measure and see that impact, to do that well, and for the companies we work with that are doing more complex motions, that are doing account-based programs, that are enabling sales enablement systems, you can put a tool in place, you can write a playbook, but you got to think about the change management and culture management required to do that well. Can you talk about what you've seen with your customers that have been most successful at changing culture and changing programs so that this sticks?
Absolutely. We've done a lot of work on this and a lot of thinking, and we've worked with some of the best companies like Siobhan Thatcher from Ring Central. We've worked with Werner Schmidt from Sage, and the list goes on and on. These are hyper confluent, like amazing company with amazing results. And they come to us with similar challenges, right? That the problems they want to solve are usually around growing faster, boosting attainment, and creating culture. They want to create a learning culture, a coaching culture. They want to create a buyer-centric culture. And so the way that we've helped them is we've mapped out a maturity model. And a maturity model for sales enablement looks something like this. Right? Let's identify the core pillars in a company's go-to-market. Let's sequence them out so that way we're not trying to do everything at once. For example, universally, the number one thing our customers come to us when they want to solve first is conversation, competence, and confidence. Let's get our teams aligned on the pitch, short pitch, long pitch, demo pitch, corporate pitch. There's a number of those, right? That may take 30, 60, 90 days to roll out, get everybody aligned, get everyone practicing, getting them seeing each other's pitches, creating a space where they can learn from each other and ultimately be better in their buyer conversations, right? Boom. Now I've done that. Awesome. Now let's focus in on the next phase of the maturity. Let's nail our sales execution. So let's do sales process and sales plays. Amazing. Now let's focus in on the next wave of maturity, which is product, competitive. And then what happens is then you've got those three core pillars and you're maturing your organization. You're guiding everyone. You're doing all the different roles. Then you can start tackling some of the bigger problems, onboarding and ramping. And then you can start really building out personalized learning paths and workflow for all your roles across your organization. That's how organizations today are driving the change so they can actually see the results and the impacts that they're expecting on their sales enablement investments.
It's premeditated. It's progressive. You don't have to do everything at once.
Yeah.
But show some early wins, make it approachable, and sort of use that to build some momentum.
I love it.
I love that. So last question, we'll let you go here today. I mean, so this is sales enablement, but there's selling and there's renewing, right? There's
Okay.
selling and there's land and expand. So talk about the potential for platforms like SalesHood to really impact customer success and account management teams as well.
Right. And so our customers today are using SalesHood across all of their customer facing roles, right? So, SDR, BDR, AE, channel, customer success, account manager. And so the beautiful thing with a sales enablement platform like SalesHood is, and when you've got the alignment and when you've got sales and marketing aligned, you publish content once, right? And whether it's the messaging or whether it's the product, the competitive, your process information, your all your tools, you create this library of content. And then what you're doing is you're creating personalized learning journeys, and then you're identifying the specific leading indicators that you want to influence. And so, a system like SalesHood will say, listen, for an SDR, we're going to measure, kind of calls made, voicemails. We're going to measure email sent, contact touches. But for a CSM, we're going to use a lot of the same content. It's going to be customized though for their role and tailored and sequenced differently. But we're going to look at a different system. We're going to look at a gain site, and we're going to look at their QBRs and the effectiveness of their QBRs. When we look at their calls for verification of competence, we're going to look for different keywords. And so, no, it's been really exciting to bring SalesHood to the broader customer-facing organization, inclusive of partner channels as well. And I think you and I both know the sales to CSM. It's in this whole kind of lead to renew. That's the buyer's journey, right? Lead to grow.
It is. And when we think not just about buying journey, we think about just overall prospect and customer experience.
It's the customer
and having
experience.
some continuity in message and approach, not just from what you hear at sales, but what you hear once you're a customer and ongoing. Super important. Well, I know you're a busy man. We're gonna let you go. Elay Cohen, CEO, co-founder of SalesHood, saleshood.com. Thanks, man. Good to see you. Hey, man,
thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it, and congrats to you.
Thanks so much. You too. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. Another episode of Sales Pipeline Radio. We'll see you next week, Thursdays, 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern. My name is Matt Heinz. We'll see you next week. Sales Pipeline Radio.